You're listening to the Fresh Hell podcast. Fresh Hell contains stories of a disturbing and often graphic nature and is intended for a mature audience. Please don't let your kids listen to this, or they might turn out like us.
Hi, I'm Annie from the USA.
And I'm Johanna from Austria, and you're listening to your favorite international podcast. The podcast hosted by two women who never met in real life and possibly never will, but who have a shared obsession for forgotten crimes and inconvenient corpses.
That's right. Oh my God. I'm choking on my own saliva again. Not again. Okay. Before we start, we would love to give a huge shout out to our Patreon members. You are the reason that we are able to keep this podcast going week after week. Honestly, did you ever think, Johanna, that we would be doing this? How many episodes is this?
290 something.
Are we coming up on 300? We miss every anniversary.
Yep.
Every year we're like, we're going to do something special for our 5th anniversary. Nope, came and went. And we're like, oh shoot, we missed it. And then, yeah, we're gonna have a 300th episode coming soon, and
we're just not gonna realize it.
No, how soon? All right, I need to look into that.
Is our 300th episode maybe in Spooky Fuckery month? Let me just look real quick.
That would be amazing. I feel like we did Amityville Horror for 200.
Oh, that's quite possible. Yeah. No, it's, if I didn't miscount, it's the one before Spooky Fuckery month.
Ah, last one in September.
Yeah.
Do you remember? Sorry. Yeah. All right. Well, we have to think about that and do something for it and not miss it like we always do. But yeah, our Patreon members are the reason that we're able to keep this podcast going. You are supporting independent podcasting. You're helping us stay as ad-free as possible. And honestly, you make this weird little corner of the internet feel like a community. And we thank you for that. If you are not on Patreon yet and want more Fresh Hell in your life, we would love to have you. We release a new Cinema Macabre episode every week. We take little breaks between those. We'll have a new one coming soon. And this is where we take apart true crime shows. Possibly in the future, we might look at documentaries because somebody has to. Why not us? And
who else is going to do it?
Who else is going to tell you scene by scene, step by step, every single thing that happens on a television program? Why watch a 20-minute television program when you could listen to the two of us recap it in approximately an hour and 47 minutes? Why?
So true.
If you're just at the point where you listen to us to fall asleep, it's so much more content, you guys. So exciting.
Yeah, there you go. Cinema Macabre, perfect. And you see us on video and we're dressed up.
It's the gift that keeps on giving. It's the nightmare. It's the nightmare that keeps repeating. It's so good. Yeah. And then once a month, of course, we get together live with our patrons. It's a very casual, off the record, surprisingly therapeutic sort of gathering. You can chat, you can lurk, you can bring your own hot takes. It's up to you. Usually with that, we get together with you all privately on our Discord server first, and then we take it public on YouTube so that people who aren't able to make it but still want to hear what we were talking about can listen later. So what else? You get early access, bonus content, and the satisfaction of just supporting two women who really love to entertain and educate you with the dark, dark thoughts that consume our minds. Do you want to feel less alone about being into and interested in terrible, terrible things? You found your people. Come to patreon.com/FreshHellPodcast. And now, finally, it's time to get into today's case. An old-timey Hollywood murder. It's unsolved to this day. It's quite the tale. And I am very, very excited about this one.
Me too. I love this period. I love this kind of old-timey cases where we can jump into old newspaper articles. I just love it.
So good.
So, what's going to happen for this week and the next 2 weeks that follow? We will be talking about the 1922 murder of director William Desmond Taylor, one of the oldest and most enduring murder mysteries in Hollywood history. It's a case filled with cigarette butts, stage mothers, missing love letters, and a very suspicious butler. Or two, who can say?
That butler is so problematic.
It's also a story about the way Hollywood built itself and the length it would go to protect that very fragile illusion. And if you've been with us for a while, you might remember when we first talked about early Los Angeles in our episodes on the Wineville chicken coop murders. That's why we're not gonna get into the whole history of why the film industry chose LA in the first place and so on and so on. We did all that. We covered all that in depth. That case took place just a few years after this one, and the boy at the center of it was Walter Collins, and he was kidnapped in 1928. And while that story became most widely known through the Clint Eastwood movie Changeling, starring Angelina Jolie, the real-life horror behind it was very much a product of the same Los Angeles that we're going to be spending time in today. Because the Los Angeles of the 1920s wasn't just orange groves and movie cameras, it was a very fast-growing but also corrupt and lawless in all the wrong places. If you were rich, you could make anything disappear. Unwanted pregnancies, scandals, and even people. But let's rewind just a little bit. By 1922, Los Angeles had transformed from a dusty agricultural outpost into something completely new, the fantasy capital of the world. The motion picture industry had started its migration west in the 1910s, fleeing the weather, fleeing censorship laws, and patent lawsuits of the East Coast. California offered 300 days of sunshine a year, diverse landscapes for filming, and maybe most importantly, distance from the lawyers of Thomas Edison.
Yes, this is maybe a fun fact for you because it was new to me. Hollywood owes its very existence, at least in part, to Thomas Edison being a bit of a control freak. In the early 1900s, Edison held most of the patents on the equipment needed to make films: cameras, projectors, even the film itself. Through something called the Motion Picture Patents Company, aka the Edison Trust, he tried to control the entire industry. If you wanted to make movies, you had to pay Edison, follow his rules, and play nice. And if you didn't, his lawyers would come for you. So what did the early independent filmmakers do? They fled, as far west as they could get, literally to the edge of the country. Los Angeles was perfect. Cheap land, sunshine all year, and it was just far enough away from Edison's legal team in New Jersey. If someone showed up with a lawsuit, they could just pack up the set, move it all a few blocks over, and start filming again under a new name.
Yeah, that's right. Hollywood was basically born out of a patent evasion. Within a decade, the dusty little neighborhoods around Hollywood Boulevard and Sunset had exploded into a new kind of boom town. It wasn't gold this time, it was celluloid. Early Hollywood was run by a handful of powerful studios: Paramount, Universal, Fox, and the men behind them were building more than just movies. They were building a myth. One where the stars were pure, the air was clean, and the worst thing anyone ever did was sneak into the movies without paying. Reality, of course, looked nothing like that. In truth, Hollywood was already in crisis by the time William Desmond Taylor was murdered. A few months earlier, in 1921, silent film star Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle had been arrested for the rape and manslaughter of a young woman named Virginia Rappi. The trial ended in acquittal, but the damage to his career and the industry's reputation was permanent. Then came the overdose death of actor Wallace Reid, another huge star. He'd been hooked on morphine, allegedly started on studio orders after being injured on set. It was the kind of death no one was supposed to talk about, but everyone did.
I'm hoping that you're going to do an episode about all of these Hollywood scandals, all those exploited child stars, the actors that got hooked on all kinds of drugs, illegal and prescription.
Yeah.
And also the plastic surgery aspect of things would be interesting.
I think many people don't even know how long it has been going on and how many stars got hooked on drugs by the very people who gave them work and fame.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely on my list. There's so much to talk about it there. I don't even know where to start with my research, to be honest. I think you could do a whole podcast about this topic alone.
Oh, for sure.
Anyway, then came the death of Taylor. Hollywood's pretty little facade had started to crack, and his murder would blast this crack wide open. Because unlike Arbuckle and Reed, Taylor had been respected, cultured. He read books. He hosted salon-style evenings with tea and classical music. Nothing bad ever happens to people like him. Until it did, of course.
The story that we're telling over these next 3 episodes takes place in the middle of a cultural reckoning. There were already whispers about lewd morals in Hollywood, but after Taylor was found dead in his bungalow, the press went absolutely wild. Ministers gave sermons. The public couldn't get enough. They wanted to know who killed him, but even more than that, they wanted to know who he really was, because the man they thought they knew turned out to be someone else entirely. But that's how Los Angeles worked in the 1920s. Hell, that's how LA worked for pretty much all of its existence, and to a certain extent still does to this day. I have the feeling there is only now a bit of a shift toward more public accountability, or at least the illusions of it. The Me Too movement was a major turning point. For decades, abuse and exploitation were an open secret in the industry, often buried under NDAs, hush money, and tabloid spin. But with the fall of Harvey Weinstein in 2017, the tide began to turn. Victims began speaking out. Powerful men lost jobs, some even went to trial, and suddenly the industry that once went to absurd lengths to protect its worst people was being forced to fess up, in a way.
I think social media also plays a role here. I think it's harder to bury a scandal when the internet is basically watching in real time.
Absolutely. But we shouldn't be naive about it. The machine still knows how to protect itself. Some stories get traction, others don't. There's still power, money, and loyalty working behind the scenes, and plenty of people who stay quiet because they have to. So, yeah, there's been a shift, but it's a long way from the kind of open reckoning many people are still waiting for. In a weird way, William Desmond Taylor's case is almost a prototype. A death followed by a cover-up, a media storm, and a lot of reputations being very carefully managed. Some things have changed, some things really haven't.
Since its early days, the City of Angels has always been a place for reinvention, for second lives. You could come to Hollywood with nothing and reinvent yourself as someone completely new. People came here to disappear, sometimes from the law, sometimes from the past, sometimes from themselves, and for the most part it worked. Nobody asked too many questions. And if they did, the right kind of money usually made them stop asking. Real estate speculators were snapping up land from Sunset Strip to Pasadena. Oil money was pouring in. Streets were being paved overnight. The LAPD, already deeply compromised by organized crime and internal corruption, had little interest in doing anything that might hurt the city's rapid rise to fame. The city's government wasn't much better. Police chiefs took bribes. Mayors turned a blind eye. If you were a studio executive or a major star, your mistakes were quietly erased, and your enemies were even more quietly erased. But that's what made the William Desmond Taylor case so unique, because despite all the wealth and power surrounding him, this murder kind of refused to go away. The longer the case stayed unsolved, the more attention it got. And the more people dug into Taylor's life, the more they discovered just how little anyone really knew about him. He wasn't who he said he was, not entirely. And we'll get into all of that. His real name, the life he left behind, the stars he directed, the women who may or may not have loved him, and the people who might have wanted him dead. Some of the names will be familiar if you're a silent film fan. Mabel Normand, Mary Miles Minter. But even if you never watched a silent movie in your life, this case has everything. Believe me when I say that. Shady house staff, missing love letters, a possible studio cover-up, a weapon that was never found, and Annie's favorite, a deathbed confession that came decades too late. So, today we're going back to the beginning, not just of the murder, but to the beginning of the myth. We'll walk through Taylor's bizarre biography, his rise in the early film industry, and what we know about the final hours of his life. Next week, we'll turn our attention to the suspects, the media circus, and the long shadow this case cast over Hollywood. But first, let's talk about the man at the center of it all.
Let's rewind a bit, because before he was William Desmond Taylor, he was William Cunningham Deane-Tanner, and his story starts in County Carlow, Ireland, in 1872. County Carlow is one of Ireland's smallest counties, but what it lacks in size, it makes up for in history. Nestled in the southeast, it's a quiet, green place. Think rolling farmland, Norman castles, and more sheep than people. In the 19th century, County Carlow was still very much a part of the British-controlled Anglo-Irish world. If you were Protestant, land-owning, and loyal to the crown, you were considered part of the ruling class, which the Deane-Tanners were. That came with prestige, but also pressure, especially for someone like William, growing up in the shadow of empire, expectations, and rigid family pride. Carlow wasn't exactly brimming with opportunities in the 1870s. It was still recovering from the effects of the Great Famine, and emigration was a fact of life. We just recently talked about this more at length in our Lizzie Halliday episodes.
Yeah.
If you had ambition and money, you left, usually for England. If you had ambition and no money, you left anyway, usually for America. William Deane-Tanner, as he was still known then, would eventually join that great wave of departures. William had been born into the kind of family that probably didn't imagine one of their own would one day vanish without a trace and reappear on the other side of the world under a different name. The Deane-Tanners were upper middle class, part of the Anglo-Irish Protestant gentry, wealthy, landowning, and very invested in maintaining appearances. His father, Major Kearns Deane-Tanner, was a retired officer in the British Army. His mother, Jane O'Brien, came from a similarly respectable background. The family was well off, and they were upstanding members of the community, and very Victorian in all of the expected ways: duty, discipline, and absolute silence about anything even remotely scandalous. William was one of 5 children, and as kids go, he seems to have been a bit of a golden boy. He was charming, clever, athletic, the kind of son that looks good in a photograph and knows how to make a good first impression. And that skill would come in handy later. In the 1890s, he left Ireland, and you might wonder, why did he leave Ireland? But that part of the story is a little bit murky. There's no record of scandal. There's no family disgrace that we could find. He wasn't run out of town, and there's no sign that he was fleeing anything, at least not officially. On paper, William Deane-Tanner had no real reason to leave County Carlow behind. I think, like so many second or third sons of the time, he probably saw the writing on the wall. He wasn't going to inherit the majority of the family estate. Ireland, in the late 19th century, especially for the Anglo-Irish, could feel like a gilded cage, beautiful, traditional, and deeply claustrophobic. If you had any kind of artistic ambition or appetite for reinvention, you wouldn't stay. You booked passage to London or New York, and you would try your luck somewhere new. And William was charming. That much is clear from every account we have. He had presence, gravitas. He was clever, funny, polished, the kind of man who could sell a story, especially about himself. So it makes sense that he left, because he probably wanted a bigger stage, with more light and more space.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere that his father kind of leased, rented, bought farmland in, I want to say Kansas. I'm not entirely sure. It's not that important because he goes to the United States, probably somewhere in Kansas, if I remember correctly. It doesn't matter. Eventually, he's landing in New York City, like so many immigrants. And there, he gets into the antique furniture business, which sounds about right for a man with his kind of, culture and polish. It was a fitting line of work. He was dealing with beautiful, old, expensive things and selling them to people who liked, old things. So William was well suited for that. He dressed impeccably, carried himself like someone from the old world, because he was. So yeah, for a while things looked pretty good, pretty standard. In 1901, he married Ethel May Hamilton, a young actress from a very well-connected theatrical family. Not a real theatrical family. They weren't just being dramatic, they were theater people.
Yes.
She was part of the theatrical elite. Her father managed a major stock company, and her sister had married the famous stage actor Tyrone Power. These whole episodes are gonna be a name dropping, a lot of name dropping. So yeah, William didn't just marry into money, he married into the New York stage world. The couple had a daughter, Ethel Daisy, in 1902, and for a few years it seemed like they had a comfortable, almost idyllic little life. A good business, a home, a child, social circle full of artists, performers, and well-to-do patrons. What more could you ask for?
Really?
They were active in their Episcopal church, they rode horses in the park, Ethel acted occasionally, William worked and played the part of a gentleman, and their daughter later remembered those early years with real affection. And then, one day in 1908, he was gone. Just poof, vanished, as Annie said in another episode. There was no warning, no goodbye. He went out for cigarettes. Well, figuratively, he went for cigarettes, never came back. One day he was there, the next he wasn't. He left his home, his business, his wife, and his 6-year-old daughter behind without a word. No letter, no warning, nothing. One day Ethel May Tanner was married, the next she was a single mother with bills to pay and no idea where her husband had gone. Friends assumed he had suffered some sort of breakdown. Others thought he'd run off with another woman. But there was no trace of him. He was just gone. And not just absent, erased. His name stopped appearing in business records. He didn't contact his family, he didn't send money, he didn't even leave a note for his daughter. Whatever had driven him to disappear, he wanted the cut to be absolutely clean. Ethel, I think, never remarried. She kept using his last name. She kept a photo of him on the mantle, and their daughter, Daisy, grew up thinking he had died, which, in a way he had. It would be over a decade before she found out that this wasn't true. But we're not there yet. For now, in 1908, William Deane-Tanner walks out of his life and leaves no trace. Not even the courtesy of a fake death.
Yeah, this is hard for me to get past because I really hate it when people do this. I find it's the worst way to leave somebody.
Yeah, you just leave them hanging there without them knowing what happened to you.
Because they can never move on. They can never, because what if something happened? What if you were kidnapped? What if you just don't know?
Yeah.
I just think this is the worst possible way. Even if even if what you're saying is an awful thing, just say, I'm leaving. So they know.
Absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
awful. Yeah. Awful.
So yeah, people have speculated for years about what happened. And as I just said, some say he had a mental breakdown. Others say he maybe got caught up in gambling or debt for whatever reason. There's even a theory that he'd fallen in with a bad crowd, possibly some kind of occult group or mobster. But the truth is, we don't know. Now, let's fast forward to 1912. Los Angeles isn't quite the Hollywood we know yet. But it's getting there. Studios are sprouting up in old barns, streets are still mostly dust and citrus trees, and the stars of tomorrow are rehearsing dramatic gasps in front of shaky backdrops made of painted canvas. A man named William Desmond Taylor arrives in town, dressed like he just stepped off a Cunard ocean liner and quoting Shakespeare at casting calls. He's also older than most of the other hopefuls, about 40 if you had to guess.
Ancient.
But he carries himself like a man used to being listened to. He's very handsome, he's very composed, and just British enough to make people in Los Angeles think he's probably very intelligent, or at least well-mannered. He claims to have been born in New York, of Irish parents. Very convenient, very vague, and nobody really checks anyway. Taylor starts out taking parts. Silent film acting, back when a raised eyebrow counted as a monologue. But he quickly catches the eye of the producers, not just for his screen presence, but for his organizational skills. He's very reliable and efficient. He shows up sober and on time, which already puts him ahead of half the town. And within a year or two, he's directing. And he's good, like, he's genuinely good. He has an eye for detail. And he treats the cast and crew with respect, which is rather rare for the time. He also has taste. He's not just interested in churning out one Western after the other. He wants film to be taken seriously as an art form. Taylor becomes a go-to director for some of the most important and influential people at the time and the place. He works with some of the biggest names of the silent era, Mary Pickford, Wallace Reid, and later Mary Miles Minter. He directs dozens of films over the next decade, more than 50 in total. Most of them now unfortunately lost, but at the time they were hits. He was considered one of the most bankable directors in Hollywood. And he acted the part too. He rented a very stylish bungalow in the Westlake neighborhood. Then, still a fashionable district for the well-to-do. It's absolutely true. Back in the early 1920s, Westlake was one of the most desirable neighborhoods in Los Angeles. It was built around MacArthur Park, then still called Westlake Park, with a man-made lake, swan boats, and well-manicured lawns. This is where William Desmond Taylor chose to live. Not in Beverly Hills, not up in the hills like the new money crowd, but in Westlake, where things were respectable and tasteful, and close to downtown, close to the studios. He lived in a very charming bungalow court at 404B South Alvarado Street. And as far as I understand, the Westlake of today is very different. It's apparently one of the densest neighborhoods in Los Angeles, and it has a reputation for being underfunded and overlooked, and very often struggling with crime and poverty. There seems to be efforts to revitalize it, of course, new developments and art projects and community work, but it's not the Westlake of Taylor's time, and it hasn't been for decades. So, he moves into his beautiful bungalow, and there he hosts elegant, quiet dinners, mostly with industry friends. He collects books, he wears tailored suits, and he's always described as refined. A man of taste. He drinks tea, not whiskey. Well, he does, but we get to that later. He prefers poetry to poker sometimes, and if that sounds a little performative, I think that's because it probably was.
But it worked. He cultivated a reputation as the moral gentleman of the movie industry. He also became involved with the Motion Picture Directors Association. After Wallace Reid, one of his frequent collaborators, died of a morphine overdose, Taylor publicly advocated for reform in the industry. He was the kind of man the studios liked to point to when the press started sniffing around for a scandal. It was something like, see, not all film people are debauched monsters. Look at Mr. Taylor. He reads Browning and doesn't even own a cocktail shaker. Of course, that public image, like so many in early Hollywood, was carefully curated. What Taylor wasn't talking about, his mysterious past. But interestingly enough, no one ever pressed. In fact, it's astonishing how little curiosity people had. Or maybe it's not. Maybe it's actually the norm for a city where everyone reinvents themselves. By the early 1920s, William Desmond Taylor was one of the most respected directors in Los Angeles. He was successful, admired, and perhaps most importantly, Taylor was the respectable face of Hollywood. Which is why his murder, when it came, was such a shock. He wasn't supposed to be the kind of man who got shot in the back and left to die in his own sitting room. He was supposed to be one of the good ones, the careful ones. But someone, clearly, didn't agree.
I think now it's time to talk a bit about Mabel Normand. She was born Amabel Ethelred Normand in Staten Island, New York in 1892, and she was the daughter of working-class parents. Her father was a shipping clerk, and the family moved around a lot in her early years. New York, New Jersey, back again, there again, back again. So she wasn't born into privilege or power, but what she did have was timing and a very pretty face, a very expressive, pretty face, and charisma. So big, it barely fit on the screen. Mabel started out as an illustrator's model, which in the early 1900s was a job that straddled the line between art and advertising. Think Gibson Girls. She was the face on magazine covers, postcards, calendars, but her big break came around 1910 when she started working at the Biograph company under D.W. Griffith. D.W. Griffith. Let's pause for a second and talk about why his is such a very loaded name in film history. Because if you're thinking, wait, that name rings a bell, wasn't he kind of problematic? Yeah, he was. Extremely so. On the one hand, Griffith helped invent the visual language of film as we know it. Close-ups, cross-cutting, dramatic lighting. He didn't invent all of them, but he popularized them and used them with a kind of, confidence and assertiveness that hadn't really existed before. If you've ever seen a suspenseful scene cut between two locations, say someone's been chased and someone racing to help them, that's Griffith's playbook. But here's the problem. He used all of that innovation to tell one of the most openly racist stories ever committed to film. In 1915, Griffith released The Birth of a Nation, a 3-hour Civil War epic that glorifies the Confederacy, demonizes Black Americans, and literally portrays the Ku Klux Klan as heroes riding in to save the day. I wish I was exaggerating. I am not. It was a massive box office success and became the first film screened at the White House. Allegedly, President Woodrow Wilson called it, quote, like writing history with lightning, end quote. The film directly inspired the revival of the Klan, and then when people criticized it, because again, Klan as heroes, Griffith didn't apologize. He made a film called Intolerance in response, which was a gorgeous and ambitious film full of symbols and had nothing to say about the racism he'd just spent 3 hours celebrating. It was basically a very expensive, I am silenced tantrum. But Griffith, for all his problematic legacy, was a major player in early film, and he knew star power when he saw it, and he saw it in Mabel. So she began acting in short films, one-reelers, mostly comedies, and she very quickly stood out. She was very funny, very expressive, and totally unafraid of looking ridiculous. While other actresses were trying to smolder, Mabel was doing pratfalls and throwing pies. She moved on to the Keystone Studios, where she became the unofficial queen of slapsticks. That's where she met Mack Sennett, the so-called king of comedy, who became her boss, but also her mentor, and possibly her on-again, off-again romantic partner. It's very hard to say. The stories change depending on who you ask, and most of them were drunk when they told them anyway, so. Sennett built an empire out of chaos, speed, mayhem, and custard pies to the face, and Mabel was right there, at the center of it all. She starred in hit after hit. Mabel's Strange Predicament, The Extra Girl, Mickey. She was one of the first women in film to direct her own movies. She wrote, produced, acted, and did her own stunts. She was making $3,500 a week at a time when the average American household lived on $1,200 a year.
That's wild. So much money.
I think it's also worth mentioning that Mabel Normand was also the woman who kind of helped get Charlie Chaplin's career off the ground. Back in 1914, when Chaplin first arrived at Keystone Studios, still new to film, still figuring out how to work with a camera and a cane, it was Mabel who showed him the ropes. She was already a huge star, already directing her own shorts, and she didn't have time for amateurs, but she saw something in him, and over the course of about a dozen short films, she helped shape his early screen presence. Chaplin would later go on to become, well, Charlie Chaplin, but before that, he was just another new guy learning how to not trip over his own feet on camera. Well, let's say he learned to trip over his own feet on camera in a choreographed way. But like so many early stars, Mabel Normand was also a scandal waiting to happen. She was very sharp-tongued, loud, she was flirtatious, and she was very fiercely independent. She drank, she swore, she smoked, she had affairs, she was rumored to be bisexual. She was also almost certainly struggling with a growing cocaine addiction, which would follow her for the rest of her life, and ultimately kind of also helped to destroy her career.
Now, to be fair, drug use in early Hollywood wasn't exactly unusual. Remember, cocaine was legal until 1914, and it was often prescribed to help actors stay thin and energetic on long shooting days. Morphine was sold over the counter. Still, despite all of that, or maybe because of it, she remained wildly popular. Audiences loved her because she felt real. In a sea of ethereal ingenues and porcelain-faced damsels in distress, Mabel was alive. She looked like she'd hit you with a frying pan and kiss you on the mouth in the same breath. People loved her.
She really does. She really does.
By the early 1920s, though, the chaos was starting to catch up with her. Her relationship with Sennett had soured. Her health was shaky. The press had started to turn on her. She was still working, still successful, but no longer untouchable. Studios were getting nervous. The Fatty Arbuckle scandal had just broken, and the public was out for blood. Hollywood was desperate to look respectable, and Mabel was a walking tabloid headline. And then she met William Desmond Taylor. They were introduced sometime in 1921, probably through the studio system or through mutual friends. She was still a bankable name, despite the scandals, and Taylor, calm, refined, and cultured, was exactly the kind of stabilizing presence someone like Mabel needed around her. At least that's what the studios hoped, and they became close. Whether it was a romantic relationship or not is still debated. Mabel always said it was platonic. Deep affection, yes, but no love affair. Still, they spent a lot of time together. Taylor seems to have been one of the few people who seemed to genuinely care about her as a person, not just as a paycheck or a publicity machine. He listened. He tried to help. He wanted her to get clean. And it's worth saying here, Taylor was one of the very few men in Hollywood who didn't seem to want anything from her. He wasn't trying to bed her or exploit her or use her name to get ahead. If anything, he was trying to protect her from herself and from the people who profited off her spiral. He encouraged her to cut ties with her drug suppliers. He urged her to get clean. According to several sources, he even gave names to the police in an attempt to help dismantle the network of dealers surrounding her. And that may have made him a good friend. It may also have made him a target. And that's where things get interesting. Because on February 1st, 1922, Mabel Normand was the last known person to see William Desmond Taylor alive. But we're not there yet. For now, we have Mabel, brilliant, beautiful, burned out, and barely holding it together. She was the kind of person who literally lit up a room and then left it scorched.
Here are some other things that happened after William arrived in LA. So between 1914 and 1919, he was engaged to actress Neva Gerber, who he met while working on The Awakening. She would later say that he was the most honorable man she'd ever known. The soul of honor was how she put it, which is a bit of a contrast considering he was still, technically, a missing husband and father at the time. So honorable. Soul of honor.
Brave. So upstanding.
Taylor's past, while not exactly public knowledge, wasn't entirely buried. Around 1915, he reconnected quietly with Ada Brennan Deane-Tanner, his former sister-in-law. Ada had moved west with her daughters after being abandoned, and now, this is so wild. She was abandoned by Taylor's younger brother Dennis, who had, in a strange twist, pulled the same disappearing act Taylor had a few years earlier. Like brother, apparently. Ada was in Monrovia, California, receiving treatment for tuberculosis at the Pottinger Sanatorium, where her sister was married to the doctor in charge. And once Taylor learned of Ada's situation, he began sending her $50 a month to help support her and the children. This act of generosity didn't come to light until after his death. But when it did, the press descended on Monrovia like vultures, sniffing around for scandal and mostly finding quiet illness and a man trying to do some small good. One article I found in one of the newspapers was where they at first thought that she, because of her last name also being Deane-Tanner, that she was another woman he had married and abandoned, but no, it was his brother.
Wow. What are the odds, right?
Yeah, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then, in the final month of the First World War, he did something very unexpected. At the age of 46, he enlisted. Taylor joined the Canadian Expeditionary Force in July of 1918 as a private. After training in Nova Scotia, he was shipped off to England in December and arriving just after the armistice was signed. So he wouldn't see combat, but he would serve. He ended up in Dunkirk, assigned to the Royal Army Service Corps, and was later promoted briefly to Major Taylor with the Royal Fusiliers. It's hard to say though how much of the rank was ceremonial and how much was earned, but yeah, the title stuck because from then on friends often called him the Major. He returned to Los Angeles in May of 1919 and was greeted like a hero. The Motion Picture Directors Association threw a banquet in his honor at the Los Angeles Athletic Club. And this was a perfect fit for his new persona, the war veteran, the gentleman director, the respected industry figure. Somewhere in the midst of this all, his past finally caught up with him. His ex-wife and daughter living back east saw him on screen, literally. They were watching the film Captain Alvarez when his face appeared, and Ethel reportedly turned to their daughter and said, "By the way, that's your father."
Can you imagine that?
Right?
And they were still married. It was his wife.
Yeah, that was his wife.
Yeah. That's wild.
And this whole time, I was thinking that becoming a movie actor might not be the best plan for someone who tries to vanish. I mean, director I get. Even today, most people don't know a lot of directors' names, let alone their faces. But actor on the big screen, I mean...
I know. It's wild. Their daughter, Ethel Daisy, wrote to the studio, and in 1921, she and Taylor met again in New York. He made her his legal heir, and while it wasn't exactly a fairy tale reunion, it seems like there was a real effort to make amends, at least financially. Back in Los Angeles, Taylor went on to direct some of the biggest stars of the silent era, Mary Pickford and Dustin Farnham, just to name a few. But his most notable collaboration was with Mary Miles Minter.
Now, if Mabel Normand was the chaotic star with a heart of gold and a bag of cocaine, then Mary Miles Minter was the other side of Hollywood femininity, the innocent. The girl so sweet you could practically hear violins playing behind her as she blinked at the camera. But as with most things in Hollywood, the innocence was mostly for show. Mary Miles Minter had been performing since she was a child, pushed onto the stage by a mother who, how do I put this nicely, makes Joan Crawford look like a Montessori parent maybe. Mary was born Juliet Riley in 1902, but that name was too ordinary, so her mother, Charlotte Shelby, borrowed the birth certificate of a dead relative and gave her a new name, Mary Miles Minter.
It's a dance mom.
Yeah.
She's a dance mom.
Just like that, Juliet became a child star. I have to say that this is a fantastic name. It has all the star qualities for the time. I don't know, maybe today it would feel outdated, but it really has a ring to it. Mary Miles Minter. I love it.
Well, I mean, if you use someone, she used the birth certificate, right, of a dead relative and changed that.
No, she used the name, I think, or wasn't it that?
Oh, she just started calling her that name without legally changing it.
Yeah.
That was her stage name.
What she did with the birth certificate, I think she did something with the birth certificate, but it was with Mary's birth certificate. She kind of forged that to make her older, something like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, she was a real peach.
Yeah, she was lovely. So, Mary began acting at the age of 5. By her teens, she was under contract with famous players Lasky, the same studio where William Desmond Taylor worked, and she was earning a small fortune. She was beloved by audiences and typecast as the sweet, demure, childlike heroine, which ironically wasn't far from her real life, except that she was also desperately in love with a man nearly 30 years her senior. Mary met Taylor sometime around 1919 when she was 17, and he was in his late 40s. He directed her in Anne of Green Gables, and later the same year, so that was 1920, in Judy of Rogue Harbor. It's not entirely clear when their relationship began, or how far it even went, if it even was. Well, we're gonna talk about all this later. Taylor was reportedly very protective of her, and some accounts suggest he kept it strictly platonic. Others say it was a full-blown romance. Either way, Mary Miles Minter was obsessed. After Taylor's death, love letters she'd written to him were found, one of which called him "my beloved daddy."
Ew. No.
Yeah, I know.
Immediately no.
Yeah, the love letters also included lines like, "I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you." She had written the exact sentence 50 times or something on a single page. I mean, she's a teenager.
She's a teenager. That I get. The "my beloved daddy" is the one that makes me actually want to vomit.
Yeah. Her mother was not a fan of this relationship.
I mean, even a broken clock is right twice a day, right?
Seems like, yeah.
Yeah. This is disturbing to me, though.
It's so, but I feel really sorry for Mary Miles Minter.
100%.
Like, yeah.
She is a victim in all of this. Just to be super clear.
Charlotte Shelby, she was Mary Miles Minter's mother. She was a classic stage mother. She was very controlling, ambitious, and allegedly violent. She'd used her daughter definitely as a meal ticket from the beginning and had no intention of letting some middle-aged director get in the way. She micromanaged every detail of Mary's life, her roles, her image, her interviews, and she was known to fly into rages if anyone threatened the brand. By the time Mary fell for Taylor, Charlotte was said to be furious and possibly scared. Not because she thought her daughter was being taken advantage of, although let's be honest, she was. That would have been a good reason for Charlotte to be raging. No, she was worried that Mary might leave the business, or worse, get married and give someone else legal control over her stardom and her money. It also didn't help that Charlotte was rumored to own a rare pearl-handled pistol, a .38 caliber. Keep that in mind for later. But back to Mary. Despite her childlike screen persona, Mary was known in Hollywood for being more worldly than she let on. She liked to party, she drank, she had already been involved in a scandal with another actor a few years earlier. In 1916, so when Mary was barely 15 years old, or not even 15 years old, she became romantically involved with a man named James Kirkwood Sr., a prominent actor and director in silent films. He was also 34 years old, married, and had children. According to reports, the two had an intense affair, and Mary, still a minor, allegedly eloped with him. There are claims she even secretly married him in Mexico, though no official marriage certificate has ever been found.
So this is a quote of one of the memorandums in the William Desmond Taylor case regarding the affair of Mary and Kirkland. And just a warning, this is extremely upsetting. This is, again, a girl who has just turned 15 years old. Quote, memorandum regarding James Kirkwood and Mary Miles Minter. James Kirkwood, actor and motion picture director, was Mary Miles Mintner's first director when she commenced making pictures for the American Film Company in Santa Barbara in 1916. She was 15 years of age at that time. She says that he made love to her, telling her that he had not lived with the woman that he was married to for several years, although she would not give him a divorce. The romance between Mary and Kirkwood reached a climax one day in 1916, when Kirkwood, then 35 years of age, took the young screen actress into the hills near Santa Barbara and, setting her up on a rock, performed a mock marriage ceremony, assuring Mary that they were then, quote, married in the eyes of God. Kirkwood then consummated the marriage in a much more mundane way, as a result of which Mary became pregnant. Intercourse went on for a number of months. Kirkwood then left for New York late in 1916 or early in 1917, and a clandestine correspondence commenced between the two. Kirkwood wrote a series of letters to Mary. These were sent to another male member of the motion picture company, who delivered the missives to Mary. The letters were in plain white envelopes labeled Juliet, which was Mary's true name was Juliet Riley. In the meantime, Mary's condition was causing her mother, Mrs. Charlotte Shelby, always a suspect in the Taylor murder, much concern. The girl's weight continued to increase, and the mother tried all kinds of diets. The correspondence between Kirkwood and Mary continued, but the mother at last intercepted one of the letters. Kirkwood, at the time, was staying at the Lambs Club in New York. Mrs. Shelby tore up the ground, to use Mary's words, when she found out what was going on. Mary was forced to write a letter to Kirkwood saying that they had been found out and that her mother insisted that their romance end at once. The mother also insisted that Kirkwood return letters written to him by Mary. The mother then took this collection of letters and kept them in a safe deposit box. They were given to Mary recently when Mary's sister, Margaret Fillmore, had a falling out with her mother. The mother supposedly kept these letters to hold over Mary's head, but Mary says that throughout the many rows between her and her mother since, that the latter never mentioned the missives. End quote.
We will get back to this memorandum after the murder when we're talking about the investigations. But yeah, Mary was underage, he was married, her screen persona was built entirely around purity and innocence, and so Mary's mother went ballistic and she allegedly threatened Kirkwood with a gun. Maybe or maybe not her famous pearl-handled one, but who's counting at this point? Who can say?
Who can say?
And she made sure the entire affair was swept under the rug as quickly and quietly as possible. And even though the relationship ended, the damage was done. People in the industry started kind of, talking about Mary, that she was not what she seemed, and Charlotte doubled down on controlling every aspect of her daughter's life and career. She was obsessed with managing Mary's image, and this first almost scandal might have been the reason why she saw William Desmond Taylor as yet another threat to her control. Mary was a teenage girl who had already been exploited by many, and tightly controlled by a mother who seemed more invested in her income than in her well-being. Definitely so. Her feelings for William Desmond Taylor may have been intense, even obsessive, but I think they were also shaped by trauma and power imbalance and isolation. I think it's not hard to understand that when she met William Desmond Taylor, she kind of latched onto him. He was older, yes, but he was also kind to her. And in a world where most men either ignored her or tried to use her, Taylor seemed safe. And from Mary's perspective, he may have felt like the only adult in her life who saw her as more than just a commodity. She fell in love with him, or at least with what he represented. Her letters to him are almost painful to read, whatever the truth of the relationship was, and we'll never really know. It's clear that for Mary, it was deeply emotional and very real.
I mean, just the fact that just previously this whole thing with Kirkwood, because nothing ever really happens to Kirkwood, I assume, because of all of this stuff that was done. Whereas Mary, 15 years old, he says they're married. And then, we know that a little bit about what was done to this poor woman. And it just kills me that despite all of this, it's going to be, oh, did you hear that Mary Miles wasn't as pure as we thought? And it's like, holy shit, stop. Yeah.
And it's so sad. And we're going to talk about it in I think, episode 3 when we talk about the aftermath. But her life was shortly happy, but even when she was old, it was so much sadness there and isolation and people trying to take advantage of her. Yeah.
I love these episodes where you do this old Hollywood history because I think so many people, myself included, have no idea what was really happening behind the scenes.
It's so sad though, because I remember when I was a kid, a teenager, and I was very much into movies and all this Hollywood glamour, but there's so much darkness, and not just in the beginning of Hollywood, not just in the 1910s, 20s, 30s. It's
I do.
Going through all the existence of Hollywood, and once you start to look at it, you can't unsee it, and it changes a lot of my perspective on movies.
See that.
On
yeah, I can definitely see that.
There's a lot of sadness.
Yeah, we have poor Mary, who is young, famous, wildly in love with someone who has groomed and abused her, and now in love with William Desmond Taylor, who, I don't know, we're going to talk a lot more about this later, but I do suspect that was a very platonic situation.
I do think so too.
Yeah. But again, we're going to talk about that more. But she did have a very real mother in her life who kept her under an absolutely iron grip and saw everyone as a threat. And it's so upsetting because her mother, Charlotte, all this is being done to her as a child, 15-year-old child. And her mother's not worried that her daughter is pregnant. Her mother is worried because she's gaining weight, and that's not going to be good for the movies.
Yeah.
And then we have Taylor, who's there trying to keep it all from blowing up, right? While still directing films and trying to help manage Mabel Normand's addiction. Normal director stuff. Basic, standard stuff.
One thing I wanted to say, I think, and we're going to talk again more about this next week and the week after that, but I think he was a really good friend to Mabel Normand. A really good friend.
I do too. I do too. Yeah. I have theories about him.
I think this is a great place to stop for this week, and next week and the week after that we'll walk you through the night of the murder, and then the discovery of his body, and the very chaotic investigation, and the long, long list of suspects, and you definitely want to be around for that.
Definitely.
Do you have something good?
No. No.
Do you want to bitch about something?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's fine. I'm sick of headaches. I'm sick of them. I'm so sick of having a headache every single day of my goddamn life for 8 years. I'm sick of it. I'm so, so, so sick of it. I'm fed up. I'm over it. I don't want to have a headache anymore, please.
Yeah. Fuck those fucking headaches.
It's brutal. And I want to thank you again, because I don't think people understand how much of this you now totally take care of, because I'm so incapacitated. And I appreciate that you just keep dragging me along with you so I don't get lost in all the, it would be very easy to just say, I can't do this anymore. I can't, because there are a lot of days where I think that, just because I just feel so awful so often, and you never let me quit. And I really, really, really appreciate that. And
you do? Now you make me cry.
No, well, good, because you deserve all the accolades. I just really appreciate that you are always willing to, you already do the lion's share of the work, and then even more, just so that I can sleep, or on days where I literally can't read or write I can't write anything. I can't take note. It's just, I know that there are other people who listen that have headache problems, but I really felt like I was managing chronic illness pretty well.
Yeah.
The Crohn's disease and a couple of the inflammatory issues and the fibromyalgia, and then boom, migraines. And it's it's so isolating. It's, I I can't even tell you just how angry I am that this is a part of my life now. And I really hope it goes away someday, but it might not. It's honestly been a rough year, and I feel like it's not going to start to get better forever because mine are weather. They're very much, it's either I don't get enough sleep, that'll give me a migraine, certain smells, but mostly weather fluctuations and not necessarily storms, heat wave, cool front moving in, just basic things. Like on the most beautiful days, I can feel so awful, and I'm just... cut all this. I'm venting too much, but you're amazing.
That's fine.
Thank you for never letting me just completely quit and curl into the fetal position and never resurface ever again, because
I say
very
thank
tempting.
you for doing this with me. And I mean,
you don't really need me. You're amazing. You could do it all by yourself, but I really enjoy our interaction.
But I enjoy it so much more with you.
Yeah, I love I hate doing it. Like, we can both totally do an episode on our own if we need to, you know, so that if we have something sorted and something comes up, which happens from time to time. But yeah, I always would rather be doing it with you. For sure. For sure. How about you?
Okay, then I'm gonna bitch about something as well, but it's so petty now compared to yours,
No.
And you know what I'm gonna say.
Are we gonna talk about the hair?
Yes, we're gonna talk
Let's
about
talk about the hair. Let's talk about it.
My dear listeners, please don't take me too seriously and don't think I'm a completely superficial, weird person, but hear me out.
She is not.
For over 3 decades, I have bleached my hair. Like, I always had blonde highlights in my hair. Never went completely blonde, but I was a blonde. I was a blonde for 30 years. But now, when you age and then all the bleaching and then with your hormonal changes and the perimenopause that is going on and the stress, I had a lot of stress over the last years, emotional stress, my hair kept falling out and it's got so thin and fragile. And I thought maybe it's time to just not bleach your hair anymore and maybe not be a blonde anymore, right? And I only ever went to the hairdresser every 6 months because I knew, okay, I have to, just thank God nowadays having like this roots showing is not such a big deal with all the, shadow roots going on. So I went to the hairdresser and said, I think it's time to go back to my natural color, which I don't even know anymore what it's really like because, as you get older, your hair also gets darker and stuff. And, just want to have it grow out. And what can I do to make it not look as harsh with my highlights growing out? And she says, yeah, she's gonna do a glossing, and she did that, and then they wash it off and they cut my hair, and the cut was nice as always. And I look at the mirror and I'm just shocked. I'm in shock. It was so dark. I swear to God, it was so dark. And she saw my face and she was like, oh. And then did kind of something where they pulled out a little bit of color. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. And I went home, and then for 2 days, I was just crying. I was crying and crying and crying because my hair now was so dark. And I was just wearing a silk scarf, even was alone at home because I couldn't even, when I walked past the mirror, I started crying again. I was bawling my eye out. So I went back to the hairdresser and I said, I can't do it with this color. And I'm going to have another appointment on Friday. But the good news, I'm getting used to the darker color. I now think it's not even that off from my natural hair color, probably.
Okay.
I just don't like the kind of red hue it has to it at the moment, but I think that's because they pulled the color out again. Whatever.
Yeah, probably.
So today I was not crying at all, and I was not wearing a silk scarf. I was proudly out and about with my
brunette
probably
hair.
Close to my hair color.
How much gray do you have?
None. I don't have gray yet.
See, that's the problem, because my problem is I'm now getting a lot of gray, but it's not. It's been such a long time since I've been able to go that my hair is actually very gray right now, but it's not gray enough. It's like, it looks like patchy, and because my scalp is white and my roots are only white here and there, it looks like I'm just balding, like really balding. But
yeah.
You sent me a picture when I think it was after you'd washed it a few times, maybe. I'm not sure.
No, that was when I came home from the hairdresser.
I still thought you looked great. I know it doesn't help when you're feeling terrible, but I was like, I don't understand why she's upset. I thought your eyes just looked really, really blue and pretty.
I just think it's such a shocking change if you've been blonde for 30 years.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's too bad you're not more gray, because then it's easy to tint your grays to like a blonde, right? You don't even need to bleach.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like a different,
That's true.
like my sister, the Moose, who does blonde highlights, has a lot of gray. And it's almost better because it's hard to tell where the silver is versus the blonde in some places with some of the highlights. Whereas I just wish I had more gray. And also my hair is now getting too heavy. It gets to a certain length where I can't cope anymore.
You have so much hair. I'm so jealous of how much hair you have.
I've lost a lot too recently. I just, I really did have a lot of hair before perimenopause and trauma. I've got that thing where every time my body goes through a real or perceived trauma, I get hair loss. But it's frustrating. It's like, a surgery that I was expecting and was no big deal, hair loss. So. Did I lose you? Are you still there? Hello? All right, let me fill our listeners in on what's happening. So as Johanna and I were just talking about hair, there was a really funny noise, and I was like, hello, and she has lost power. So she's on cellular data with me. Her recording has stopped. But the good news is we're at the end of this episode. So that was our something good. And don't worry, she hasn't, flung herself off an Alp because of the hair. She's just completely lost power. So if you enjoy the show, please take a second to leave us a rating or review. It really helps new people find us. You can also subscribe to Fresh Hell on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. And if you are on Spotify, don't forget you can subscribe directly there for early access and bonus content. And of course, we would love to have you join us on Patreon, where we release a brand new Cinema Macabre episode every week. We also do monthly live get-togethers where we hang out, answer your questions, and sometimes spiral into oddly specific top 5 lists. It's chaotic, but in the best way. Come lurk, come chat, come see us fall apart in real time. That's at patreon.com/freshhellpodcast. If you're not already in our Facebook group, please come find us. Just search Fresh Hell Podcast Murder Group. We're also at freshhellpodcast.com. And don't forget to email us your favorite alligator, crocodile, crocodilian stories and your stories for this month's spooky episodes at freshhellpodcast@gmail.com. As we said, it's not too early to start thinking about our annual Halloween episode. So anything spooky, creepy, or just plain weird, please send it. We're going to be doing a giveaway again this year, just like last time. And yes, it will be something small and sinister delivered by mail. Speaking of the mail, our P.O. box is listed on our website and in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. We truly, truly appreciate you. Please tell your pets we said hi, give them a kiss, cuddle them. Don't forget to love the unloved, the slimy, snaky, slithery creatures. Please give others the benefit of the doubt and remember to also be kind to yourself. And if you're going through hell, keep going. We will both be back to talk more about all this next week. Tschüss and goodbye.